Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk about 5 ways to improve your next video editing project. There are probably countless ways to improve your next video editing project. So this is just 5. At some point, maybe we'll come up with 5 more and call it 5 more ways to improve, and yet another 5 more ways to improve your video editing project. But here is the first 5 of maybe a potential future series. I'm not going to give them away in the introduction here, so you have to listen to find out what they are. But if you don't know these tips already, you're going to find this really useful because these are pretty important. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes or Spotify or whatever app you prefer and click the subscribe button. It will deliver the podcast straight to your mobile device whenever a new one is available. It's convenient for you, and it also is a big help for us. So with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
Okay, Chris, you said right before we pressed record that we've changed as many things as we could possibly change for this podcast.
Well, there's only like 3 aspects of it. In this case, it's both cameras got switched because normally we're running Canon, and today we're running Panasonic. We've got the GH5 II and the GH6. My camera's the GH6, and yours is the GH5 II. And I made the change because the other cameras are out of the room. So I made the change, and I'm reviewing the GH6 at the moment anyway. So why not put it in another situation?
And let's see, you were shooting today.
I was shooting an interview.
So yeah, well, I guess that's telling, right? That when it's time to actually do some paid work, the Canons go out and the Panasonic stay in the studio.
I don't know if that would be this time. I might be using their cameras because we're making something for them.
Oh yeah, that's right. They require that.
They don't require it, but you can tell a Canon camera from looking at it usually. Yeah. So I would rather shoot it on a Canon than try to make it look like a Canon.
Yeah. And then let's see, at least one of the changes, I'm wearing different headphones today.
Yeah, you the same reason, left the headphones with all the gear at the interview setup, which I'm actually going to be doing tomorrow. And so I had to use different headphones. I'm usually using the things we use at our desk, which is the Bluetooth headphones. So it actually sounds a little different. And you're using the headphones I normally use.
Yeah, it does. It already sounds way different for me too. Actually, I can hear you crystal clear and myself just normally.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so today we're talking about editing.
Yep.
And we have written this article. We're doing a podcast about it on 5 ways to improve your next editing project. I was just thinking there's probably a bunch more things you could do to improve beyond this list.
Yeah, totally.
And maybe we'll get into some of that, but we're prepared with these first 5 things. So I guess we just fire right through it, eh?
Yeah. So what's the first one, Mike?
The first one is know your tools.
Yeah. So I always run into this one when we're like, hey, learn a new editor so that you can review it. I'm like, cool. And then when it comes to making a video about that tool, I use whatever editing tool I'm used to and know well, because, sometimes, well, in most cases, I don't want to think about the software. I want to be thinking about the story. And if I'm not really very well versed in the software, I'm going to be hunting and pecking for the tools that I need. And I'm going to probably lose inspiration, motivation, and all the rest just by having to, fumble around in menus, which can be frustrating.
Yeah, and also another dynamic here, I don't know if this comes into play with you, but with a lot of things, and this is beyond just editing, but doing any kind of work, at least for me personally, after I work for a while, I become tired, right? And my exhaustion can show itself in the work. And when I first started to learn to edit video, I would only use the edges of the clips as handles to drag in and out. Like that's the only way I made trims, right? I would put a clip down, trim it in, trim out the in point, trim out the out point, put the next clip, trim out. If I needed to make an adjustment to where 2 clips met, I would grab the sides on each one, drag them. And I didn't know anything about ripple or roll or even like the razor blade tool. I use the same tool all the time. And as a result, it took me a long time to actually do a decent project. And I felt myself, like I said, becoming tired at the end, but also, just kind of trying to get through it. It's just a lot of work. Yeah.
Well, and that was the days of like ingest, right? Like now you're just pulling data off a card, whereas it used to like you had to choose what you wanted to digitize and bring into your system
Yes,
or what
exactly.
have you. And so I find a lot different in that. But that was some of the traps I remember starting off real early, which was I'm going to go and trim every shot that I do to make it the best it can be. But I might have 5 or 6 versions of the same shot. Why do I need to trim every one of them to being perfect? Maybe I ought to choose one of them and then just do it to that, which is, of course, what I tend to do these days. In fact, these days, I like to just put all my footage in a timeline and kind of scroll around to find stuff and not even trim the ones I want. I'll take the meat that I want and put it into my edit, but I'm not necessarily, trimming any of my footage. And I'm hoping that my shot was long enough half the time. That's really about the biggest worry. And those is, if you need to cover up 7 seconds and your shot only took 6, you probably learned something about shooting that day.
Yeah, I'm thinking in my own editing experience, it comes down to getting everything on the timeline and then doing like the frame accurate tweaks, like I'm going to make this cut at just the right point, right? And I want it to come in and the timing to start at just the right point. Not to say I was any good at it, but I did that. And as a result, every time 2 clips met, I would spend a lot of time adjusting the in and out point. That's actually after setting the initial in and out point for the clip. But once I discovered the tools of like the slip and the slide edit, the ripple and the roll, I could get through a sequence way, way quicker. And it wasn't, for me at the time, it wasn't about like being more efficient and using that time wisely for other things. It was just like, if I wasn't exhausted while I was doing the edit turned out better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Well, and I'm one that likes to be inspired by my edit. Like it continues to give me energy to keep on driving, right? That's the dream is to work a whole bunch of hours and not feel like you worked a bunch of hours,
exactly,
right? Just to be in it and really enjoying it. I love that flow state, and you can't really get there if you're not too comfortable with the tools. And as well, you got to find a workflow that works for you. And I think that's the other bit of this is knowing your tools, but knowing like how you're using them and what order you're using them. Because if you make a certain product, over and over again, I made lots of commercials. Now I make lots of instructional videos, and you find the things that work for those. And those are just like, the tools in your box, you don't always use them, but you sometimes need that specialty tool or whatnot. And I mean, even down to editing, I remember getting to the point where I knew someone was out shooting and we're going to need to edit it really fast. And it was going to be a montage. I would just edit to the song Colored Slugs and then replace them with video clips after the fact. So the timing of the edit was all there. And then I just slipped the footage in around and you could have it done. Now that's because someone else was out shooting and I could do that at the same time. But you wouldn't come up with those kinds of solutions if you weren't, you didn't know your tools and what you need to achieve.
So Chris, you just mentioned a bit of jargon I feel like we need to define.
Okay.
You said you edited to the music Colored Slugs.
Oh, Colored Slugs.
Yeah. So just find out what a colored slug is. Because it could be the track, right?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that song before.
Yeah, no, the Colored Slugs. That sounds like a funny band name. No, so there's just color matte. That's also jargon matte, but it's just a
solid color.
A solid color. Yeah. Yep. And the idea here is just I show, like for a commercial, it was 30 seconds. So you're going to get at most 7 cuts in that. So I have 7 different colors, separate them so the pacing of everything. So then you can make the power of the edit or even with where the voiceover is going to go, you could really feel the whole thing and you just don't even have footage yet. And then you just plug the footage in and then boom, it's done.
Yeah, that's interesting, Chris, that you used the Colored Slugs. My trick for that was to use markers. And I would play the track because you can set a marker in real time just by pressing a key. I would play the track and just on the beat, I would hit the M button.
Totally.
And then when you're editing, it'll snap to the markers.
This was, I guess I did that too, but it was like more so I could put graphics and it was, I probably should have done that because it was meant more for when you're slipping and you hit that edge where something else lines up. It just that it lines up with that. So like I could start making graphics on areas and that kind of thing. And so it really was the idea is just, they were placeholders for us to replace. These could have been really low resolution proxies. They could have been photos, who knows what just have placeholders in there for you to move on. So it's it's not something I did all the time, but it was definitely something that was valuable when you really had came into a pinch. And that's knowing your tools, right? Knowing what you need to get done and how to get them done and the amount of time you have. And so sometimes that means coming up with new ways to do it.
Yeah. Also, there's a number of tools where you discover them as you grow in your editing skills, that it's just like one of those moments. It's like a light bulb moment. Like, oh, if I only knew I had this, my previous stuff would be way better, right? So like if you knew how to use, I don't know, the noise gate tool, like you just didn't know until your 8th project or something. If you had that skill down at your first project, this would have sounded way better from the start.
Yeah.
There's countless tools like this.
Oh yeah. So, I mean, I'd say the first few years of my life in doing video production, like I was having to take away every time we did a new video, and luckily for us, we were doing lots of content. Mm-hmm. So it was like rinse and repeat and do it over and learn from it. But, if you weren't taking away some kind of thing you learned from the last project, there was really no way to get better, right? Like if you're not really trying to learn from your mistakes. And the nice thing for me was that I was learning stuff on how to be a better shooter from having to suffer as an editor. There's only so many times where you don't have a shot that's long enough before you shoot a long shot every time. And those are really helpful things. So it helps to be your own editor in that way, or to work with someone that's going to give you really good input every time you do it, so that the two of you can work in a better way.
Mm-hmm. Ready to move on to the next one?
Let's move on.
Okay. Keep it together or stay organized.
Yeah, I'm not a very organized person. I'm kind of I like to kind of live in my filth in the way that goes. But when it comes to editing, man, nothing's worse than wasting a bunch of time hunting for something. If you spent a little time setting up your project and then following your protocol that you have, hopefully you have some kind of protocol in the way of like how you save and store and organize your work, then it's just keeping up. So I remember Nicole, our old managing editor, she used to say, if it's time to lean, it's time to clean. Like you're going to, if you're cooking, if you can lean against the counter, it's time to start cleaning. And so I always found that sometimes the organization was that brain stop that I could do, like, oh, I'm working really function. Okay, I need some time to do some mindless work. Cool. I'll organize. I'll make some bins. I'll put, I'll organize them so I can find the stuff. I'm going to rename things that instead of this being comp number 5, 7, 9, all the way to 50, maybe I'll name those comps so that if someone ever comes in this project again, they'll be able to find their way in, or even self-preservation for yourself. But the biggest thing is just when someone goes, hey, I need that thing, it's really nice to be like, I know where that is.
Yeah.
Because it's a pain to go, I think where it's at. And then you go look and you go, maybe it's not there or whatever it is. And it's just nice to go, no, I got it. It's right here. And, there's a lot of anxiety around a loss of data. So if someone's requiring to get something from you and you know exactly where it is, and they're going to have a lot less anxiety over how the data is being used or if it exists still.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard that? I don't know. It's a health and nutrition concept where it's like, if you want to eat healthy, the thing you should do is keep healthy foods visible in your own house, right? Like, this is what I think about staying organized in general, but specifically with video editing, because when you're editing video, you have so many things to keep track of, like dozens or hundreds of clips and sound effects and music and all those other things, which is to say that, drawing back to the health and nutrition thing, the food that you eat at your house is the food that is present when you open your pantry door or open your refrigerator, right? Like the stuff that's in the front is the stuff that you happen to grab. And if you want to eat certain foods, you put those things in the front of the pantry so you see them when you open the door.
Hence the moldy bread I have in the back of my
exactly. That's happened to me too a number of times when it's tucked behind the beans or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But the same thing that can happen when you have hundreds of clips. When you go to reach for a clip that you need to fill in some spot, you're going to grab the one that's present.
Yes.
If you have it organized, then the good ones are the ones that are present. If it's unorganized, you have everything, and you're probably not going to go through everything to find the clip. You're going to grab the one that's convenient.
Yeah. And that's so that's through, if you are about metadata. So if you're on like a Mac, you can add tags to stuff as you import it. And then that metadata follows it around if you're in like Final Cut or something. And that's really, really helpful. So that's more of like, and that's the thing I miss about ingest is you got to know your footage a little bit better because you had to watch it again. You couldn't just bring it in and then scrub through it and find it. You might go, oh no, really? When I did it the fifth time, that was the one. And you knew that before you started editing. So you could just go right to it. And I can tell you every time I've ever edited with a mission, with the idea I have all of the things that I need, all the ingredients to make this pie. I can make this pie in a really efficient way if I just know it's just all there. And if I already know where I'm headed, then all I'm doing is just filling in puzzle pieces and then it's done. And it feels like you're not even having to make choices because the choices were made before you started. And that's where organization really helps with that. Cause you can know, what you have, what you don't have. You can have marked the stuff that's worthy of spending any more time on or using or getting rid of or what have you. Helps you with your archiving of not having to keep all the crap shots you have. Let's just bring the ones in that you're going to use. All that stuff is going to pay in spades. I mean, unfortunately, what made me a very good editor in After Effects was having to be in a lot of projects that someone else made that was really, really poorly organized. So I had to go into every single one of their compositions and understand what was in it. And then the sub composition, I needed to see all of the aspects of the edit. And then it's like, oh yeah, I just need to do this and this, and something really complicated could actually be done really relatively easily. But I had to organize first. So that was always my first thing. It was like, this Morgan made this, so it's going to be really unorganized. I'm going to have to spend some time organizing it. And then once I can do that, then I can assess what I need to do. And I know where I'm headed and what I can do. And I can tell you when you're doing like archival documentary editing, nothing's better than having all of the B-roll that you need to cut to just available and ready to put in there. I mean, I like to use B-roll if I can, and if I have it at my fingertips while I'm doing the rough edit, because why not? I can make them longer or not, but the more the project starts to feel like something as I'm making it, and the more it starts to be a story and that kind of thing, it becomes enjoyable to watch. But it also is like, oh, it's this thing. I'm almost birthed it. This is almost it, And so, like I said before, you get energy from the being able to create that thing. And if you're organized, you're going to be able to reach for the salt when you need the salt, and you're going to reach the sugar when you need the sugar. You're not going to have to go looking through the pantry to hope to find that one little ingredient. Well, you probably will still have to do that. Unfortunately, there's always the hunt and paste. And I remember days of having to find elements before there was the internet search to find things, or, easy to use stock media. It's like, oh, I have to go look in a magazine, read a description of something, pull a disc, pull that thing off and hope it's something like what I was looking for, versus like the ta-da of today of going, I'm looking for blah, blah, blah. Oh, look, there's 7 options. I like this one best. Let's go.
Yeah. I think it's easy to fall into this trap where you're starting off with kind of a small project, or even if it's a big project, you might start off with a small sequence or something. You fall into this trap of like, well, I'm only doing a handful of shots, one sequence, a couple of titles. And you don't really put much into the organization of like making sure these are in the right folders or tagging them with metadata or whatever.
Yeah.
But eventually, depending on the project, I guess, these projects, you just sort of put more time in it, more time into it. And if you don't start with that organizational step, you tend not to continue doing any organizational work. And you get into this mode of like, oh, now I need to go find this thing. And holy cow, I've been working on this project for a while. And I started with 5 or 6 clips, and now there's 70 clips, and I haven't been doing this work the whole time. You just find yourself in these circumstances.
Well, and you could take even longer view if you're looking at your specific, like us. If we had as much metadata as we could on all of our shots that we've ever taken, it'd be relatively easy to make a video about X, Y, or Z, because we have lots and lots of content about that. But we don't, that's been something I have a knowledge of it, but we don't necessarily have this is where these shots are. And that would be really helpful institution wise, but that's like super long view. That's, outside of project, that's outside of, year, that's long view of what value is this going to be able to have over time. And of course, anytime you're doing the compound of small amount of time, it does add up. I mean, I remember going from, it took me 3 days to do the work that by the time I was done making commercials at the station, that could take me 3 or 4 hours to do. Mm-hmm. And it was through organization, and because of, well, knowing what you're trying to achieve and what things need to be organized, by having a workflow that's just there. So it's a default. You're not having to invent a work, this is how I do my file folders or whatever. If you have to think about that every project, then you're already wasting time. This isn't something that needs to be reinvented every time. In fact, it's not even one that you need to have the best way of doing it. Quite frankly, the best advice is just to be organized, regardless of how you can stay organized. It's good to have a consistent way of staying organized, but just being organized is step number one. Not having a good, naming protocol.
Yeah, and one way you know that this is important. One clue here is that when you launch Premiere or whatever editing software you're using, the software itself, the interface where that shows you all of your library, basically, of clips, has all these organizational tools already on display, right?
Totally.
And there's a reason why those are there, and it's not because a developer thought, hey, someone might like this.
Yeah.
No, it's because they build this software and they talk to the people who are doing this every single day, saying, what do you need? And they say, we need these organizational tools, right? Like Hollywood demands that these are in the software, because they rely on them. So if the pros in Hollywood need these tools, then we probably need them too.
Yeah, well, I think of this, if say you're doing a long form project, you got lots and lots of assets, and you're in chapter 2 of your film or whatever you're making, and you need a bunch of shots of, let's say, school buses. It's going to be the section you're talking about, school buses. If you color coded all of the imaging or all of the interviews about school buses or whatever all together, then they also have a visual organization that you're able to go, oh, if I labeled everything I need in this section green, I'm not going to use a clip that I labeled yellow. I don't even need to know what green and yellow mean. I just need to know that yellow's outside of what I should be using.
Yep.
And that could be something someone else can be delivering to you. Surely a producer could come with all that thing and when I need this edited, here's the kind of roadmap. It's all organized for you. Here you go. Unlikely. More likely you're going to get a project with just a crap ton of everything. Mm-hmm. And then it would make a good sense to spend as much time as it needs to get it all organized before you start step 1, because every step after step 1 will be so much faster to achieve if you can move on to step 2 as soon as you're done with step 1. That's the big thing. It's like, oh, I can get step 1 done. Oh, but then I'm gonna have to take some time. It reminds me of whenever you hire a contractor, every time that contractor has to go back to Lowe's, it just costs you more money because now you're paying them to shop, not build you stuff. Mm-hmm. And so if they have to go back to the store 3 times in a day, you just paid a whole bunch of money just for someone to go to the store. Whereas if they were just a better shopper, they could have bought all the things at the beginning of the day and brought it with you. And instead you get to pay, more money for a bad shopper. Mm-hmm. But that comes, I think, up to our next one, really.
Yep. Which is make a goal.
Make a goal. Yeah. So this can be, checklists, whatever the goals are for you. It's just more of you're always trying to achieve the next thing, right? So if it's my goal at the top of the hour is to be done with my rough cut. Cool. Great goal. You don't have to make big goals for every day. In fact, it's probably better and less overwhelming to have smaller goals that you take on. And those goals are going to help you with the roadmap in the future because they're going to help you with what workflow you're going to follow to finish that project.
Mm-hmm. And then there's other more tactical goals, right? Like my objective is to complete this sequence, the final sequence in under 2 minutes. Not 2 minutes of work, but the final sequence duration.
Yeah, it needs to be 3. It needs 2 minutes because that's the space it's filling or whatever.
Right, exactly. Or likewise, I need to convince someone to do a thing in this thing. I need someone to convince someone to buy a new blender. That's the objective of what I'm trying to achieve here.
Yeah, and the goals it could be I'm going to edit till this is emotional, or just the goals don't have to be as specific as I'm going to get 20 frames down to 10 or whatever you're trying to do as far as that goes. But those goals are still helpful. I mean, the goal of I want this to be an emotional edit can help anchor you to making creative decisions that you don't have to think hard about. that goal will help center you to making the right choices for your project, because that's where you're headed. You're trying to make these choices to get to that goal. So therefore they're going to be informing how you make your steps you're taking.
Yeah. Also, you don't have to necessarily sit down with one goal for the whole project, right? It could be one goal per editing session. Like you said, maybe the goal for one session is I just need to finish a rough cut. And then you come back the next day and your next goal is I need to cut this down and shave 3 minutes off of this edit. And the next day you come to it. Now I need to ramp up the emotions so that I think it's going to make the average viewer cry by the end, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. And you got to find and achieve that goal. And of course, some of those start to become like, the intangible. So you're going to have to really work on that creative part of it. But like, here's a good example. A lot of times will have, 30 minutes left of the day. Now, given I work a 9 to 5 here, so we aren't like normal editors that just keep on working. So I'm like, oh, well, what's a 30-minute job I can be doing? So then I go, okay, my goal is to get this done before 5 or whatever it is. And usually ends up being like, for me, because I tend to jump into doing audio work first because I just like doing it. And of course, it makes the rest of the production seem nicer already once the audio sounds good. It's like, oh, I can actually forgive some of my shooting stuff if it sounds really good as well, if you said need to. But the small steps. I mean, I just do a to-do list all the time. And anytime I think of anything I need to complete that I'm shooting for, write it down so I can, and not because I need it to remind me, that is helpful, or even the order of which I need to do it, but for the achievement of crossing it off. Like that motivates me to get done because I want to be able to get that off my list, and that is in itself motivating.
Yep. Next tip, stay on track. And this actually has to do less with, your day-to-day work and more about the pacing of the video itself.
Yeah.
Which we have this under editing. This is kind of a pre-production project as well, right? Like just in terms of I need to spend this much time for this video, doing the exposition, right? Introducing characters or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, you could get to your destination by driving all over the place, but it's probably a lot better to get there in a straight line. And it's probably going to be easier to understand where you're headed if you're headed in a straight line. Now, given we want turns and we want fun things in storytelling, we don't want to just go straight to because then every movie would be 15 minutes long. But it's important to stay on those. It's setting those goals. I think even stay on track in the way of when I do a critique of my edit, I get a notepad and my goal is not to pause the video, but to write down the notes I see as I go and make it all the way through the end, because my goal is to make the video better. And it's going to take me a lot longer if I nitpick every little thing and go and fix the thing, rather than if I make a list of the things I need to achieve. And then I know I can just stay on track and just do those things that matter, not spending, a whole bunch of time on, you can get lost in the weeds, like in color and other ways of like, oh, I can make this better. And then 2 hours passed and it's like, oh, I wasn't staying on track of just even timing wise. You just went on this tangent. And of course I'm notorious about tangents when I'm talking, but it's, it's really important to stay focused on your goal there and find your way all the way to the finish line too. Because all this work is not really for anything until you actually finish the product.
Yeah. I think what occasionally people do, especially new editors, is they kind of let the footage guide the end result in terms of like, say you're conducting a series of interviews, the person who happens to be the most verbose in how they speak gets most of the screen time in the end because they spoke a lot. And when in reality, the deciding factor of the pacing of the video should be what the storytelling's purpose is and the objective of it and all that, right? Like just because someone spoke for a long time doesn't mean you have to put them as the main star of the video, right?
Totally.
You also see this a lot with YouTubers where they will not be terribly deliberate with the structure of their video. So they will just talk and talk and talk about whatever to the camera. And that ends up being what the video is about, right? Like they cut up the the pauses, so
Yeah.
that there's like all these jump cuts in it, whatever. But there's no real deliberate beginning, middle, and end, where the beginning is kind of the short exposition part, and the end is kind of this the short denouement, basically the end of the video that summarizes everything. You get these weird videos where the introduction is half of the video, right, and then the middle is 25% of it. So the pacing should be deliberate, and a lot of times with scripted videos, this should be worked out on paper before you start. But even in unscripted videos, you got to be deliberate about how much screen time are you getting any additional part of the video. You as the editor, especially if you're the director, I guess, or specifically if you're the director, should make those decisions and don't be guided by what happens to be recorded.
Yeah, me making a lot of videos, what it also lines up to being is staying focused on the story so that you don't get off it to make someone to go, I don't want to watch this. You don't want, tangents are fun, but they're also, very distracting. So if you're really trying to make a good story, those tangents are not going to necessarily help anything. And like in the case of like, you have someone that is well-spoken on camera and you're like, oh, well, I want to use this guy because the other guy did lots of ums and ers, but he had not a lot of substance in what they're talking about. Well, you're nice shot and he well-spoken, but he didn't go anywhere with what he said. And so what do you do? And that's the kind of things where you can, well, I guess I'm going to have to go with this guy that's more boring because he's actually saying better things. But what that will challenge you then to go is, well, why is he boring? What can I do to make him in the edit less boring? Oh, I could show B-roll and get rid of his ums and ers. Oh, okay. Actually, when I got rid of all that stuff and put some B-roll in here, this guy's really compelling. Yeah. And you never gave it a chance before because you weren't trying to make it compelling. You were just looking what could easily go and line up. And I mean, I'm guilty of that. I remember so many times just like, there's this great idea for a shot. It's going to take a lot to effort, but I could do something really close. It's like, takes 5 minutes. Can't I just do that? And it's like, but when you take the time to do it, you're like, no, it was worth the extra effort, but you couldn't really make that judgment up first. But if you want to stay focused on your story, sometimes you just got to do those things that might take you more time.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So maybe that's a good segue to the next section, which is kill your darlings.
Yeah, kill your babies.
Kill your babies. I was thinking, actually, let's see, can we come up with an even more offensive version of this than kill your babies? I was thinking maybe we should call it kill your puppies.
Yeah, kill your puppies. Kill your newborn puppies. So the idea here is that you might make a beautiful shot. You might have a wonderful story. You might have whatever it is. You're really enamored with it, but you have to question yourself. Is this what the story needs? Should this be included for the story's sake, not for I get to show off my cinematic prowess or, just the different things that you might be proud of a shot. I mean, I don't know how many times I've done just a beautiful shot and I'm like, there's really no place for this. And it really doesn't work to kind of shoehorn in. Like, I love this shot, but I don't know where I could put it in this thing. And it's like, well, I have it. Well, I'm just not going to include it because it doesn't belong. But you have to be able to identify why it doesn't belong and that it doesn't belong. And it's really hard to do when you're really proud of one aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So I think this guy that we're talking about that might be well-spoken and all that kind of thing, well, he didn't go anywhere, or you loved the shot. He was really well-spoken, but he didn't say anything. Well, don't use him. I mean, yes. You can't, at no time should you be thinking that, well, everything is disposable is really what it should be. You should be willing to throw anything away if it's not to help the story. And that helps make creative decisions sometimes too, though. Like, okay, I'm not choosing to get rid of this thing. The story just doesn't need it.
Yep.
So I'm going to have to leave it away. Now, the idea of killing your cute little puppies, I guess God had to make that choice sometime too, right? I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know about you, Chris. I've ran into this all the time back when I was doing commercials because I was kind of new in my career, and it would happen all the time where I'd learn something new and I would apply it and I'd be so proud of that thing, and it actually served no purpose.
Yeah, it had no use in the whatever you're doing. You're just like, oh, cool. I remember doing that with that shallow depth of field at first. I'm like, oh, I figured out how to do this. Why? I can. That's why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I can, and I'm excited about doing that. And you can get away with some of that kind of stuff. And I remember even going to the point of like going, I'm going to do this 3 times just so I can justify it existing.
Yeah.
So it's now, it's a what is the term for that? We have a video about it. Reoccurring thing. Motif. Yeah. So it's a motive. So, that's a great thing, but does it help your story? No. Heave-ho. I run into this every single project I do. And it's far less frustrating as it used to be. Mm-hmm. I have plenty of stuff that I'd love to show people, never will, because it just doesn't fit in whatever I was doing. The nice thing for me is I'm always talking about cameras. So like I've had so many times where I did something and I'm like, oh, I love this, but it doesn't fit the thing. Well, soon enough, I'll have something that actually it will be a good use for, and I'll have it and I'll get to use it. But not everybody's as beneficial as being able to use all of the stuff they ever shoot. Sometimes every single time it's a different client, and you'd never cross your shots from something else. But it's nice to have in your back pocket. I don't know how many times when we'd be frustrated by a client that would want something different. We did something we thought was amazing. We loved it. And then the thing that we loved, the client's like, that's the only thing I want to change. Otherwise it's perfect. Yeah. And we're like, well, I guess I'll save that one for the demo reel. And that was always the thing. Like, okay, cool. Well, I'll save that version for myself. And the funny thing is I've watched back at some of my, director's cut versions of things. And I'm like, nah, it ended up being better. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes you have to be humble enough to understand that other people have a better vision of maybe what needs to be achieved than you do, because their position is actually to see that and yours is to make video.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to throw that in as a bonus tip. I'll hold on to it just after I make this one last point here, which is the sad truth of the matter is, and I would say this is the case in life with a lot of things, not just video editing. No one really cares, unfortunately, that this shot that you're really proud of is what it is, right? Yeah. Like the sad truth is you'll do a thing, you'll be really proud of it, and then you'll show it to a stranger and they won't even know it exists or that it's important at all. And in fact,
or even to appreciate it.
Exactly. And I'll go a step beyond and say even beyond a stranger, but like a family member, they're going to look at it and go, hey, great job. But they won't know that the shot that you loved is especially important because of whatever reason. And that's just how it goes. Like no one appreciates your babies, your darlings, as much as you do. And
totally. I mean,
might as well cut it just to make the project better.
You ever see that mama with a really ugly baby? She still really loves them, doesn't she? She thinks they're the most beautiful baby ever. And it's just not true. Yeah. She's blinded by her love. And that's totally understandable. So, that's the thing there that you have to understand. But the nice thing is you can see it from the other side there of going, you know what? I'm giving this up for the project. You can do it in the name of art in the same way of like, oh no, I made that was this really artistic expression, but you know what? My artistic expression overall is actually better achieved by leaving it out. And so you can make it better work. And if you look at it that way, you try to spin it positively, you're not going to be as sad about getting rid of those things. But like I said, every project I've ever done, there's some aspect of it that I'm like, I wish I could fit this in here. And sometimes you can, sometimes it works. You're like, oh, I went to do something and I achieved it and it fits in what I'm trying to do. Other times it's like, I went to achieve something. I got something else that I loved, but it doesn't fit and it's something else. And that's neat. But I think I shot a macro shot of a bee on a flower and I shared it to the people here. And I couldn't fit in the video review at all. And I was like, man, I've been trying to do this full frame, slow motion bee on a flower shot for I don't know how many different times I do it. And now I have no purpose to have it other than I just used it for some test footage or something that's just going to go past, and that has to do with, we have to, as digital artists in general, doesn't matter if you're making film, video, music, what you make is going to be seen and then it's going to sit on a hard drive somewhere and just sit there. It might have served its purpose and then it's just there. Right. So think of that. If it was your baby and then it really never went anywhere, then not only did you let your baby live, but now it's just not doing anything or not valuable. So,
just so to illustrate this concept, you remember Breaking Bad? Breaking Bad's been off the air for a long time.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah. Love that show. I love it. It's my favorite show. And when it was on the air, I would like listen to the Breaking Bad podcast with the editor. The editor of the show was the host of the podcast. That's and fun. Every episode, she would host this podcast talking about the making of the episode. And frequently, and this, I was in the video production world at the time, working professionally. Every once in a while, she would go, "Oh, and then we had this shot out in the desert. It was just this beautiful shot of this, and we just had to find a way to get it in and all that." And I, who loved the show, I'm like, "Huh? What shot are you talking about?" Like, yeah. It just breezed right past me. And of course, being a nerd in this, I went back to the episode and watched it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess it is pretty nice." But even in that case, this is anecdotal, obviously, I was a diehard fan of this show, and the thing that they were most proud of, I didn't notice, didn't pick it out from the shot on either side of it. So happens. Okay, how about a bonus tip?
Okay, bonus tip.
This actually makes it 6 tips, but I think we should keep the title 5 tips. This is just a bonus for people who listened all the way.
If you made it all the way through, here's this bonus tip for you. Put this in your back pocket. Surprise your friends.
Yeah. So just thematically tying into the last tip is show your edit to someone who will give you honest feedback about it. And oftentimes, what happens invariably is you look at something for a very long time. You watch it over and over again. You watch the same cuts over and over and over again. And you see things that no one is ever going to see. And likewise, you're blind to things that everyone else is going to see.
Yeah.
And I have never had a video or an edit that I showed to someone and they didn't come back with something that I missed.
Totally.
And
so there's so many moving parts of it, right? So you're keeping track, you're staying organized, but sometimes, I mean, like for me, I'm guilty of it. I will capitalize something for no good reason, and my brain cannot see that it's wrong.
Yeah,
great to have someone else look at it. When I was first starting, a black frame where it doesn't belong. I couldn't see a black frame, just one single frame. And now I can. And so like, it's almost immediately anybody showed me something, I could be like, okay, here's some of the technical things to deal with that I know I'm going to see or what have you. But the big thing is make sure whoever you give it to, you trust their opinion enough to respect it, and to give it some thought. I have a hard time with that sometimes. And it's not necessarily you want to evaluate who's giving you input, but that you need to value it because it's hopefully it's for the goal of making your whatever it is you're making better. Even if if a customer is the person, they change the thing that you want to do or whatever it is, most of the time, no one's trying to sabotage anything. And that's a hard thing to think of when you're making art and someone asks you to change it, but that like no one's actually attempting to make this worse. I mean, likely, surely there's some bad people out there that are screwing with people, but that likely it's going to be some helpful advice. And now you don't have to take all advice and all input, if it's something that somebody does subjectively, it just helps you question why you did it. Maybe it'll help you understand why you did it or give you a reason why you should do it a different way. Maybe not their answer is the way to fix it, but it's important to see what other people's reactions are to it just for the sake of everybody. I mean, think of like comedy, like stand-up comedy. I think of this as like, a comic could give the same joke night over night and the audience changes. And I imagine the beats that they laugh at change as well. Or if you just change the joke just a little bit, all of a sudden it doesn't get laughs, or you change a little bit and it just kills. That's the kind of thing that those small little changes that you might not be able to understand because it's really not you that you're entertaining. You're entertaining others. And so, you're doing it maybe for self-gratification. I know I've definitely felt that way when I'm editing. It's like, man, am I just doing this because I want to do it? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, if that's the answer, fine, then I'm going to do it. But that it's real important to get input from others. And it's nice when you might not be detail oriented to get someone to give you those types of input. And it can be somewhat devastating to get input on something that is hard to fix, right? So someone says something's wrong with the shot that the person, it's dead or something, I don't know. That's the worst case scenario, but like, just, you're not reshooting it. So, that's when the creative mind of how can I fix this and how can I make this the best it can be? And sometimes that's accepting it. And other times that's by trying to find some solution.
Yeah. And in fact, I would say in some cases, this feedback is so important that if you don't hear it, and you don't fix it, even if fixing it's going to be difficult, the video is a failure as a whole, right? So an example of this, we'll just go back to commercials. Like you and I were doing 30 seconds at a time, right?
Yeah.
Like I just need this commercial to make the viewer aware that there's a 50% off sale this weekend.
Yes.
If you show the video to someone and then after it's done, ask them, tell me what the sale is, and they can't repeat it to you, it's a failure.
Totally. It was a waste of your time.
Exactly. This happens a lot, even with movies or TV shows, where there's like some subtle things that you're trying to get across. So let's say you're making a movie, and one of the elements is a young boy has a crush on young girl, and you just got to figure out, does the audience know that that's the relationship? Can they pick up that the boy has the crush on the girl?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing can be subtle, right? Like the way that the edit is constructed, he looks at her a certain way is supposed to communicate this. If you know the story inside out and you're editing it, you can't see it with beginner's eyes, with fresh eyes to be able to pick up on those nuances. And so you got to show it to someone and then ask them, can you tell me about the relationship between these two people? If they can't repeat that to you, if they can't tell you that, oh yeah, he has a crush on her, well then you need to go back and fix it and make it more obvious somehow, drop more clues that this is the case.
Yeah.
Because you can ask someone, like you could show someone a short film that you made, right? Especially if this is a family or friend, and say, what do you think? And they're going to say, oh, it was great. But
why wouldn't they say that?
Exactly. But if you can get more specific questions in there to make sure everything that needs to come across does come across, then you're going to get the details that you need to go back and fix it.
Yeah, and that happens in writing too. So if you're writing a script, make sure someone reads it, because sometimes there's aspect of the story that's in your head that you think you're communicating, but you're not. This is, I think, a good way of thinking about it. You ever seen the Febreze commercial? You've gone nose blind?
Yeah. Yes.
Same idea, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, when you're recording audio, people call it ear fatigue. Oh, I've got ear fatigue. I got to stop. I got to walk away from it, come back with fresh ears. All it is just getting some space between, so you can have some contrast on what you're actually seeing. Because if you're comparing it to this thing you've been watching over and over and over again, eventually it kind of reminds me of like some words, when you just say them over and over again, they just completely lose meaning, and you need to get context again to be able to understand and make them have meaning. And that's really the idea here, is that, like, if you can step away and get that story. And so that's the help fresh eyes that other people, and it even helps sometimes if they're not in the industry, right?
Yes.
Is you're like, if you're trying to show something that you're trying to work in the normal, if you're making a film, don't find another film buff. They're going to notice, of course, all that long shot, the beautiful dolly shot you did or whatever. Sure, that's great. They're meant to do that. But how about someone that's not going to appreciate that anyway? No one's going to even be able to identify in the first place. Did they like it? Was it fun? Did it, or whatever the thing you're trying to achieve there. And that's really important, because that kind of insight will help you the next time you have to do that. You're like, oh, and I know this is anecdotal, right? So you're just getting anecdotal advice from somebody else that's looking and giving their thoughts on something, but there's ways to verify it, right? Because you can just go, well, let me hear what they had to say. Okay, let me watch this with that in mind. Oh, you know what? They are right. I mean, advice is just that. You don't have to take it, but it's important to hear it for the sake of the consideration that it might make your work better, and that you should be searching out for that, because the goal hopefully is to make the best thing you can every time you make it.
Yeah. I learned about this thing years ago that professional colorists use when they're color grading, which is a white card next to, in their edit bay, white card with a daylight light shining on it, with the idea that when you're color grading all day long, you're adding like these, looks to it. And you might be, let's say you're editing a sequence that's got kind of a bluish grade over the top. Well, if that's all you stare at all the time, it gets bluer and bluer and bluer and bluer over time, because your eyes and your brain are calibrating to this new color, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't see how blue it is. So the next shot's just a little bit bluer because you want to make it this blue tint.
Because our eyes are very adaptive.
Yeah,
they're going to do this.
Exactly.
They're going to trick us.
Exactly. So they have this white card so that they can turn away from the screen, look at the white card, and recalibrate the brain to like, what is white?
Yeah.
And then they can turn back and they can continue to work. So they're recalibrating their own brain. But when you're talking about story elements and communication, the only way to recalibrate is to forget the story. And you can't do that. as an editor or a director. The only way to do it is to have someone who doesn't know the story in the first place to look at it, and with fresh eyes to try to pick up on things.
Yeah, and it's real hard to do that on your own stuff. I mean, you could do something like, I'm only going to write down what I feel from what I'm seeing, or different ways of trying to get around it. But I think that you want to have an anchor. So like in coloring, another good example, you get an anchor shot. So the idea is that you have a shot that is the quintessential, that every shot that you colorize that's the one you're coloring it against. That's the one you're looking at to A/B against what you've done, because what that allows you to do when you're 10 minutes further in your edit and you're doing another shot, that you haven't gotten so dramatic in your color because every incremental thing got a little bit, it just gets away from you.
Yes.
Versus like the idea of, if you're always going back to that anchor, regardless if it's 10 minutes, an hour away from that other shot, they should both have that same foundation. And cool thing enough about that is it also could be, I mean, I'm sure that like in the Matrix, they had to have like, in the Matrix, they had to like have a shot that anchored them for in the Matrix coloring. Okay, here's when they're not in the Matrix. This is and then this is the color and feel. And those are the things that you have to really internalize, because if you're not trying to go back to that, you can drift so far away. I mean, it reminds me of the game Telephone, right? You know, you can get so far away from the story through miscommunication. And so just as easy as it is to miscommunicate in life, your story can be miscommunicated just as well through your story blindness. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can coin a new
story
phrase.
blindness. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. 6 tips. We promised 5. We gave you 6. Hopefully.
Bonus. That's that we just made you more money. I don't know how.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, maybe we'll call it there, right?
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks to everyone for listening. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we would love it, of course, if you subscribed, but also we would love it if you went to the Apple Podcast app and left us a written 5-star review. We always love reading those. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I've been Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.